My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 33 and work as a financial analyst in Boston. After years of hard work, I finally built a stable, independent life. So when I opened an envelope and found a $480,000 mortgage in my name for a house I'd never seen, I thought it was identity theft. Then came the real shock. A call from my mother. "We've decided you'll pay for your sister's mortgage," she said, like it was no big deal. When I refused, they sued me. What followed was a legal nightmare that tore my family apart and nearly destroyed my financial future. Before I tell you how it all began, let me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe if you want more real stories about family and financial boundaries. Let's begin. I thought Q3 reporting would be the worst part of my week, until I opened an envelope that made my stomach drop. The weight of exhaustion settled into my shoulders as I kicked off my heels by the door. November evenings in Boston always had that damp chill that seeped through your coat no matter how thick it was. I shrugged mine off and headed straight for the kitchen counter where my mail had been piling up for days. A mix of utility bills, a credit card offer, and a glossy furniture catalog I hadn't subscribed to. I flipped through the stack, half on autopilot, until I noticed the thick white envelope stamped with the blue logo of Massachusetts Bay Mortgage Company. My brow furrowed. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't even own property. I lived in a rented one-bedroom apartment with beige walls and an outdated HVAC system that rattled every time it kicked on. Curiosity pushed past fatigue as I tore it open. The first page was a "Welcome to your new homeowner experience" letter. The next few were worse. Much worse. Loan amount, $480,000. Property address, 247 Oakwood Drive, Winchester, Massachusetts. Monthly payment, $2,850 for 30 years. My eyes blurred as I flipped through page after page. Terms, conditions, amortization schedules. My name, my full legal name, was printed on every single page. And the signature? It wasn't mine. It looked close enough to pass at a glance, but I'd never signed these papers. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself, heart pounding in my ears. Identity theft. That had to be it. Someone had stolen my information, taken out a nearly $500,000 loan, and now the debt was sitting squarely in my lap. Fumbling for my phone, I Googled the mortgage company's fraud department number and dialed with trembling fingers. "We're sorry," the automated voice chirped. "Our business hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time." It was already past 7. I hung up and leaned against the refrigerator, staring at the pile of documents like they might rearrange themselves into something less nightmarish if I looked long enough. 1,000 thoughts crashed into each other. My credit score, my job. Could this ruin everything I'd worked for? Without thinking, I scrolled through my contacts and hit call on Emily Parker. She answered on the second ring. "Maddie? Everything okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaky and thin. "I just opened a mortgage packet. In my name. For a house I've never seen." There was a pause. Then, "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Dead serious." I slid down to sit on the cold kitchen floor. "It's for nearly $500,000. Winchester. I have no idea how this happened." Emily didn't hesitate. "You need to freeze your credit. Right now. Call the 3 bureaus. And start documenting everything." I already left a message for the mortgage company. "Good. And Maddie, if this gets any worse, lawyer up." Her words rang louder in my head than anything else. I stood up on wobbly legs, still clutching the papers, when my phone rang again. Unknown number. For a split second, I wondered if it was the fraud department returning my call early. I answered. "Did you get the papers?" My mother's voice floated through the line, casual, like she was asking about a birthday card she'd mailed. I froze. "Mom? We thought it'd be better to explain over dinner." She continued breezily. "Come by tonight. Your father and Sierra will be here too." My stomach twisted into something unrecognizable. "Mom, what's going on?" Her tone shifted just enough to make my skin crawl. Don't be so dramatic, Maddie. It's a family matter. We'll talk at 6. The call ended before I could say another word. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. The documents lay scattered across the counter like wreckage after a storm. I whispered to myself, barely able to get the words out. What the hell is going on? I drove 2 hours to Connecticut for answers. I left with a betrayal I never saw coming. The highway blurred past me as I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Every mile felt heavier than the last. I kept replaying my mother's casual words on the phone, each syllable dripping with something I couldn't quite name. Entitlement, maybe. Or worse, certainty. Pulling into my parents' driveway, the same cracked asphalt I'd parked on hundreds of times before felt surreal. The porch light glowed warm and inviting, like a scene from a Hallmark movie. If I didn't know better, I might have thought this was just another family dinner. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my skirt, and climbed the steps. The door opened before I could knock. Madeline, you're here. My mother beamed like I was some long-lost relative finally returning from war. The smell of pot roast filled the air. Comforting, familiar, manipulative. Come in, sweetheart. My father's voice boomed from the living room. I stepped inside and saw them all arranged like a tableau from a bad intervention special. Dad in his recliner, Mom perched on the armrest like royalty, and Sierra sprawled out on the couch scrolling through her phone. Fake cheerfulness coated everything like cheap perfume. Sit down, Maddie, Dad said, patting the worn armchair across from them. I stayed standing. I'm not here for dinner. I want answers. Mom sighed like I was already being difficult. Can't we at least start with a glass of wine? No. Silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We know you're upset about the mortgage papers. Upset? I laughed, sharp and humorless. I'm furious, confused, terrified. Take your pick. Mom smoothed her blouse like she was prepping for a job interview. Honey, this is all a misunderstanding. We were going to explain sooner, but things moved faster than we expected. Explain what? That you took out a nearly $500,000 loan in my name? Sierra finally glanced up from her phone. God, Maddie, it's not like you're poor. I turned to her, pulse spiking. Stay out of this. My father held up a hand, signaling for calm. Let's start from the beginning. And so they did. The beginning, apparently, was Sierra struggling to pay rent again. Her lease in Cambridge was about to end. Her credit was in shambles thanks to unpaid bills and defaulted credit cards. According to them, she deserved stability. She needs a fresh start, Mom said, eyes shining with manufactured sincerity. In Winchester? I scoffed. One of the most expensive suburbs in the state? Dad leaned forward. Good neighborhood, good schools, safe area. It's an investment in her future. I blinked. Her future? Well, our family's future. Mom amended quickly. I forced myself to ask the obvious question, though I dreaded the answer. How did you even get my signature? Mom hesitated for half a beat too long. You know I've always been good with paperwork, she said, smiling like she expected applause. My stomach lurched. You forged my signature? It's not forgery if it's for family, she replied, as if that settled the legal definition. Dad added, You're the responsible one, Maddie. You have the income, the credit score. Family helps family. I stared at them, unable to process the sheer audacity. You mean, you decided, without my consent, that I should carry this debt? For 30 years? Mom's voice dropped an octave. It's not like you're married or have kids. You have room in your budget. Sierra chimed in, voice dripping with entitlement. It's not like you can't afford it. You're always bragging about your promotions. I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a hairline fracture reaching its breaking point. I'm reporting this, I said, rising from the chair. My voice shook, but I didn't care. To the mortgage company, to the police, to anyone who'll listen. Dad stood too, face flushing deep red. You're being hysterical. I grabbed my purse and turned toward the door. Before I could step outside, my mother lunged forward and grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. If you leave now, she hissed, you're no longer part of this family. By morning, I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was their primary target. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was the blinking notification light on my phone. I grabbed it with groggy fingers, expecting maybe a couple of missed calls. What stared back at me was a wall of numbers that made my stomach knot. 47 missed calls, 23 new voicemails, text messages so numerous the preview screen gave up and simply said, 99 plus unread. All from Mom, Dad, Sierra. I scrolled through them like someone flipping through crime scene photos. The tone shifted with each message. Pleading, guilt-tripping, angry, and finally, outright threatening. Mom. Maddie, please stop being difficult. Let's talk about this like adults. Dad, you're making a huge mistake. You don't understand what you're doing to this family. Sierra, congrats on ruining Thanksgiving. Hope you're happy. I dropped the phone onto the couch and sank to the floor, legs folding under me like wet cardboard. The mortgage documents lay scattered around me, mixed with unopened bills and the takeout menu from last night that I never used. Somewhere between the legal jargon and the fluorescent ink of Sierra's Instagram posts about her dream house, the truth settled in like a stone in my chest. This wasn't just a bad decision on their part. This was war. Tears came fast and hot, blurring the edges of the room. I pressed my palms to my face, rocking slightly, trying to slow the rising tide of panic clawing up my throat. If you leave now, you're no longer part of this family. Her words looped, taunting me, making it hard to breathe. The buzz of my doorbell cut through the fog. It's me, open up. Emily's voice, sharp, urgent, exactly what I needed. I scrambled to the door and unlocked it with shaking hands. She stepped inside, took one look at me, red-eyed, still in yesterday's clothes, and immediately dropped her purse to wrap me in a fierce hug. I brought coffee and moral support, she said, holding up a paper bag like it was a trophy. I let out a broken laugh that tasted more like defeat. We sat cross-legged on the floor as I laid it all out for her. The dinner, the forged signature, the threats. Her expression shifted from disbelief to full-blown fury. They've completely lost it, she muttered, scrolling through her contacts. You're calling a lawyer today. Non-negotiable. I shook my head. I don't even know where to start. Or how to afford this. Lucky for you, I do. She tapped her phone and grinned grimly. Remember Natalie Jacobs, paralegal at Meyer and Goldstein? She owes me a favor. Hold on. 10 minutes later, Emily handed me the phone. Madeline? Natalie's voice was calm but firm. Emily told me what's going on. Can you come in this afternoon? I'll squeeze you in for a free consult. 2 hours later, I sat in Natalie's tiny office surrounded by case files and coffee mugs with sarcastic slogans. She listened, took notes, and didn't interrupt once. Not even when my voice cracked halfway through describing the forged documents. When I finally ran out of words, she exhaled slowly. This is serious, Madeline. We're talking federal mortgage fraud, identity theft, potential wire fraud if any of this was submitted electronically. I swallowed hard. What do I do now? First, protect yourself. We're drafting a formal letter, certified mail, to both your parents and the mortgage company, stating that you had no knowledge of this loan, you did not consent, and you will not be held responsible. She pulled up a template and started typing like her keyboard owed her money. By the time I left her office, I held 2 thick, signed and sealed envelopes in my hands, my first real weapons in this fight. That evening, as I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, a new voicemail notification appeared. I didn't want to listen. Every instinct screamed at me to throw the phone across the room, but I pressed play anyway. Dad's voice came through, low and icy. We're suing you. Full value of the house. $480,000. You want a war? Fine. You've got one. My breath caught. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, reality setting in like concrete around my ribs. They were really going through with this. Just as the weight of that sank in, my phone buzzed again, this time from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, professional but urgent. Miss Carter, this is Sandra from Daniel Reed's office. Mr. Reed can see you tomorrow morning at 8:30. Don't wait. Being served with a lawsuit from your own parents hits differently, like swallowing glass. The envelope was thick, official, and resting like a landmine on my doormat when I got home from work. I stood there for a full minute, keys still in my hand, staring at it as though opening it might trigger some irreversible explosion. I opened it anyway. The words blurred together at first. Plaintiffs, defendants, damages, breach of agreement. But one number leapt off the page with surgical precision. $480,000. I sank onto the floor, back pressed against the door, reading and rereading the paragraphs. My parents were suing me for the full value of the house they'd fraudulently bought in my name. Emily's warning from weeks ago rang in my ears. If they're willing to fake your signature, they're willing to do worse. Apparently, this was the worse. The complaint was 32 pages of pure revisionist history. According to them, I'd verbally agreed, on multiple occasions, to take responsibility for Sierra's mortgage. They painted me as an ungrateful daughter with a history of reneging on family obligations. They even cited my previous refusals to help Sierra with rent and credit card debt as evidence of a long-standing pattern of selfishness. The gall. The sheer audacity. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my dining table with the lawsuit spread out in front of me, flipping through each page with trembling hands. They had twisted every fact, cherry-picked every conversation, and sprinkled just enough emotional manipulation to make the whole thing feel like gaslighting in legal form. They even included screenshots of old texts, carefully cropped to remove all context, trying to show I'd supported family financial decisions before. By 7 a.m., I'd called Daniel Reed's office and left a rambling, half-coherent voicemail. His assistant, Sandra, called back an hour later and slotted me in for noon. Daniel Reed's office was on the 21st floor of a sleek downtown tower. Glass walls, leather chairs, and framed degrees from Harvard and Yale. He had the look of someone who'd seen every variety of human ugliness, and charged by the hour to fix it. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. The forged signature, the harassment, the lawsuit. Finally, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. This case is legally weak but emotionally toxic. They're counting on you being too overwhelmed to fight back. So, what's the plan? I asked, heart in my throat. We file a motion to dismiss for lack of merit, he said, and we hit them with counterclaims, emotional distress, harassment, and defamation. It sounded aggressive, but strangely comforting. Still, the emotional fallout hit me hard that night. My stomach twisted in knots, making it impossible to eat. Waves of nausea and cold sweats kept me curled up on my bathroom floor for hours. At one point, I pulled out the lawsuit packet again and found myself highlighting phrases like intentional infliction of emotional harm and irreparable damage to family relationships. Funny, I thought bitterly. They finally got that part right. Emily showed up around 9 with ginger tea and a weighted blanket, settling on my couch like she wasn't leaving until I fell asleep. Half an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Uncle David stood there. Dad's estranged brother I hadn't seen in years. His face was older, more lined than I remembered, but his eyes were the same, sharp and tired all at once. I heard what happened, he said simply. Your father pulled something similar on me 20 years ago. Don't let him do to you what he did to me. We sat and talked for an hour. His story wasn't identical, but close enough to feel like history repeating itself. By the time he left, a strange new resolve settled in my chest. The next morning, Daniel emailed me a scanned copy of the official motion and counterclaims, already filed with the court. Later that afternoon, another email arrived, Subject line, court date confirmed. I clicked it open, pulse pounding. December 15th, 2023. Judge Valerie Hughes presiding. If this was a movie, this would be the final courtroom showdown. But for me, it was just another Tuesday, with my entire life on the line. The air in courtroom 4B felt heavier than oxygen had any right to be. Every breath tasted like stale carpet and institutional panic. I smoothed my skirt for the 5th time, fingers trembling no matter how tightly I clenched them. Daniel sat beside me, flipping through his case file with a level of calm that felt almost alien. Meanwhile, across the aisle, my parents sat rigid and defiant, flanked by their attorney, Robert Price, a man whose suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. Sierra sat one seat behind them, staring at her lap like if she didn't make eye contact with anyone, none of this would touch her. Judge Valerie Hughes entered right on schedule. Mid-50s, sharp eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses, and a reputation for zero tolerance toward courtroom theatrics. "All rise," the bailiff announced. We did, and just like that, my fate rested on arguments and evidence. Price went first. He stood, buttoned his jacket with practiced flair, and launched into what I could only describe as a dramatic reinterpretation of family loyalty. "Your Honor, this is not a case of fraud," he began smoothly. "This is a misunderstanding between loving parents and a daughter who's forgotten her obligations. The Carters only acted with their family's best interests at heart. Financial support between family members is common, expected even." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. When he finished, Daniel rose like he had all the time in the world. "With respect, Your Honor," he said, tone measured but deadly. "This is not about family obligations. This is about consent. And more importantly, fraudulent misrepresentation." He walked to the evidence table, lifting a printed email chain for everyone to see. "We present Exhibit A, an email exchange between Mr. and Mrs. Carter, dated 2 weeks before the mortgage application, where they explicitly discuss forging my client's signature." Judge Hughes adjusted her glasses, scanning the top page. "We'll do it first. Explain later?" she read aloud, raising an eyebrow. Gasps rippled through the gallery. My mother's face drained of color. Daniel wasn't done. "Exhibit B," he continued, lifting another sheet. A text message from Linda Carter to Sierra Carter, sent the night before the mortgage was finalized. It reads, "Relax. She won't dare fight us on this." I didn't look at Sierra, but I felt her stiffen behind me. Price objected on grounds of context, but the judge waved him off. "Mr. Price, sit down," she ordered. Then she turned to my parents. "I want both plaintiffs to approach the stand. Now." Linda stood first, shaky on her heels. Gerald followed, jaw clenched. Judge Hughes fixed them with a stare sharp enough to cut stone. "Did you, or did you not, forged your daughter's signature on federally binding mortgage documents? Yes or no?" My father hesitated, darting a glance at Mom. Linda's lower lip trembled. Tears pooled instantly, like flipping a switch. "We only did what we thought was best," she whimpered. "Yes or no?" Judge Hughes repeated, her voice iron. Gerald cleared his throat. "Technically, yes, but no buts." Judge Hughes slammed her gavel once. "This is not a parenting dispute. This is premeditated fraud." Daniel closed his file with a soft snap, like punctuating a sentence. "Your Honor, we rest." There was a long, terrible silence before the judge spoke again. "This court finds no legal merit in the plaintiff's claims. Case dismissed with prejudice. Defendant's counterclaims for harassment and emotional distress will proceed to damages evaluation. Additionally, sanctions will be imposed on the plaintiffs for filing a frivolous lawsuit and abusing the court's time." The gavel hit the bench one final time. It was over. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. My whole body shook with adrenaline and disbelief. As people began filing out, Daniel leaned toward me. "Good job staying calm. Most people crack under this kind of pressure." I nodded numbly, gathering my things. Just as I reached the hallway, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Check Boston Globe's website. You're already making headlines. Victory isn't a parade. It's sitting alone in your apartment, surrounded by legal papers, wondering what comes next. The official documents arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Thick envelopes with embossed seals, one from the mortgage company, the other from the court clerk's office. I tore them open with shaking hands, but read every word with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The first letter confirmed what Daniel had promised. My name had been officially removed from the mortgage. The fraudulent debt no longer shadowed my credit report. The second letter detailed the court's ruling on attorney fees, $15,000 awarded to me as partial reimbursement. I laughed when I read that part. Not because the money would cover everything. I was still thousands out of pocket. But because it felt like something tangible, proof that the system hadn't entirely failed me. Later that evening, as I sat cross-legged on my living room floor with the court papers scattered around me, I realized something else. I wasn't crying. The last time I'd sat like this, I was panicking, gasping for air between sobs. Now, I just felt still. Emily arrived around 7 with a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout Thai. To new chapters, she said, raising her glass. To fewer lawsuits, I joked back. The next morning, an email from Uncle David popped into my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Breaking the cycle." I opened it with a lump in my throat. Proud of you, kiddo. Not many people stand up to family like this. I didn't. Not when it mattered. You broke the cycle. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. I read it twice, then saved it in a folder labeled Keep Forever. A week later, a small package arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Grandma Margaret's. Inside was the wooden jewelry box I'd treasured as a kid, the one I hadn't seen in years. Tucked inside was a note in her shaky cursive. This always belonged to you. Love, Grandma. I ran my fingers over the smooth oak finish, feeling more seen and understood than I had in months. By mid-February, the dust had settled enough that I started going back to my favorite coffee shop in Cambridge. On one particular Saturday, while scrolling through housing listings on my laptop, a girl approached my table. "Excuse me," she said, voice trembling. "Are you Madeline Carter?" I blinked. "Yes?" She held up her phone, showing my name on a forum for victims of family financial abuse. "I'm Rachel," she said, pulling out a folder of paperwork. "My parents, they took out a car loan in my name. I don't know what to do." I gestured for her to sit. For the next hour, I walked her through steps, freezing credit, contacting legal aid, documenting everything. At one point, when her hands started shaking, I touched her shoulder. "You're not alone," I said softly, "and you're stronger than you think." That night, back in my apartment, I opened a new browser tab. My cursor hovered over the Publish button for the blog post I'd spent weeks drafting. Why I fought my family, and why I'd do it again. I clicked. The post went live. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Sierra. No subject, no preview. I stared at the screen, heart in my throat, wondering, what now? ChatGPT ja noi. Tang tang sohai, nghin go, van hung jem kong ingu ja koi kung. Jan huang chocho mochio. Madeline chua tung, kam dai trong hiu nam, dai bing. What began as a devastating betrayal ended in a courtroom reckoning that not only cleared her name but shattered a toxic family dynamic that had festered for decades. Some battles, she realized, aren't about winning back love, but about reclaiming dignity and drawing boundaries that should have existed all along. When injustice meets unwavering resolve, the echo of truth leaves scars, but also opens the door to freedom.